Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection episode 178. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is this brand new item that just arrived in the mail from Big Bad Toy Store. Now you can see this is a big box. It's about the size of a small appliance. And I've gotten some pretty big boxes from Big Bad Toy Store in the past. Usually that's because I've ordered a whole bunch of stuff. But in this case, it's just one large item. Now this is an item that I pre-ordered, I'd say, well over a year ago. I'm not sure when exactly. So I've been waiting a while for this. But in some senses, you could say I've been waiting for this toy most of my life. About 40 years I have wanted an action figure of this character. I'm super excited about it. I'm not super thrilled with the price that I had to pay for it, but I'm so stoked that this is finally here. This is going to be a big, exciting item. It's not as big as this box makes it look. There's a lot of packing material and stuff in here, so it's not that crazy, but it's big. And without wasting any more time, let's get into it here. All right. Invoice. Lots of bubble wrap. Which is good. Big Bad Toy Store always does a great job of packaging their items. Alright, so there's another cardboard box inside of this one. So I think I'm going to have to lift this out of here. So bear with me a second. There, you see already this box is a little more reasonably sized. So, alright, here we go. Here is the final box. So you can see here, this is the Kraken, as designed by Ray Harryhausen from the 1981 film Clash of the Titans. So, I was born in 1978. I saw this film pretty early on in my life. I would say I don't know if I saw it exactly when it first came out. I didn't see it in theaters or anything. So I was probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 or so when I saw this film. And I loved it. You know, this predates CG animation. So all the creatures in it were stop motion, you know, puppeted by Ray Harryhausen. And I absolutely loved this creature when he comes out of the sea at the end of the movie. Now here is the Kraken scene at the end of Clash of the Titans. So if you haven't seen this, here's a 40-year spoiler alert. So at the end of the movie, they hook up Andromeda there to the rocks, and the Kraken comes out to get her. Now, I've edited this myself. In between all these shots of the Kraken, there's a lot of shots of like gasping crowds, and you see the hero Perseus flying in closer on his horse Pegasus. But I've chopped all that out so you can just see the shots with the Kraken. And you'll see the Kraken himself is only on screen for about 2 minutes worth of screen time. But he made a big impression in that time on me when I was like a young 4-year-old kid. So yeah, I just thought this guy was awesome. All that stop motion animation. I really wanted this figure. And even though I never got that 1980 figure and I would have loved to have it, it didn't really look like the Kraken in the movie. The sculpt on that figure was pretty soft. So even if I had that, I might have still considered buying this new one from Star Ace. But yeah, very cool stuff. So there's Perseus. He holds up Medusa's head to the Kraken, which turns the Kraken to stone, and then he cracks and breaks apart, and that's the end, and they all lived happily ever after. And I wanted an action figure of the Kraken so bad back in the day. They actually did make one, but I never saw it, I never got it, and yeah, it's quite expensive on the secondary market. So yeah, this has just been a white whale of my collection for all these years, for literally as long as I can remember. So even though I still would love to have that original figure from the 80s, it was nowhere near as detailed as this thing here. You know, this thing was designed in conjunction with like Ray Harryhausen's estate. This thing is super authentic to the original model that was used in the movie. And yeah, I'm just super stoked about it. So yeah, let's get this guy out of here. So there you go. Big picture of the Kraken on the side. Kraken on the front. I think that's the same picture as the other side. Really cool shot of the Kraken. Big close-up on the top of the box. And yeah, the back we've already seen. Looks very similar to the front, except it's got a cross promotion for one of the other figures in the Ray Harryhausen line. So yeah, this thing looks awesome. I don't keep a lot of toy packaging, but this is definitely a box I'm going to hold on to. So I've got to be careful not to destroy it. Alright, 2 pieces of styrofoam inside. Might have to shake this guy out of here. Okay, so the figure is in 2 pieces. Now already he's looking much smaller compared to what the box initially seemed to indicate. Still a good sized figure though. So here is the tail. So this is a separate piece. The only other thing I see in here is an instruction sheet. I don't know how much instructions you need. As far as I can tell, all you have to do is plug the tail in. It might be recommending that I heat it up or soak it in some warm water so I don't force it, which is not uncommon. But here is the main guy. So you see, he's not so big. This definitely kind of made it look like he was going to be a lot bigger. But still pretty awesome. Alright, there we go. It's the Kraken. After all these years, I finally have one. Now, I'm going to switch things around and do a little bit more of a close-up so we can get a better look at him and everything. But, yeah, here's the initial shot of the Kraken. With the tail plugged in, he's going to be, not sure exactly how, about that big. That's about the size of him in total. But yeah, I'm not going to try and force this in until I read those little bit of instructions. And yeah, I don't know, like, my initial impression, like, I knew, I guess, sort of how big this was going to be. I've seen, you know, with the ad when I pre-ordered this, they gave the measurements about, 12 inches tall, 18 inches across, or whatever it is, something like that. So I knew, at about 12 inches tall, he's only going to be about the size of, your average, Barbie doll or something. Like, I do have some 12-inch action figures in my collection, like from Hot Toys and stuff. So I knew what to expect size-wise. But especially seeing the size of that box and then what I end up with in my hands, my first impression is that he is a little small. And I was already, I don't think there's any way, unless you're extremely wealthy, that you couldn't have a little bit of buyer's remorse or regret about just how much money you spent on this thing. No matter how large this was going to be, it was always going to be a little hard for me to look at with complete joy because of how much money he cost. Same as, I don't know if you can see, I've got Snake Mountain here in the background, this big purple mountain. That was something I had ordered from Super 7 a couple of years ago, or maybe just a year and a half ago. That was similar. Very expensive, very awesome, very big. But when I look at it, I'm just thinking, like, man, I could have went on a trip to Mexico or something for what I paid for that thing. This guy wasn't quite as expensive, but he was quite expensive. And, yeah, so he's kind of small. He's kind of small. But if I can get past trying to justify the value for what I paid, like, he looks awesome. Got a great paint detail on him. Love the face. Just very, very cool. Another thing which I knew going in, but is obviously, it's a disappointment, is this guy is advertised as like a vinyl statue. So he doesn't have any movement. Now, once I plug that tail in, I don't know, there might still be a little bit of movement there, but that would be it for movement. He's got 4 arms, and none of these arms move. Like, it would be nice if there was a swivel there. If his head could turn just a little side to side, if his arms could move up and down, he would feel more like an action figure as opposed to just a statue. I typically don't buy any statues. I like action figures. So that's a little bit of a bummer too, but I knew that going in. So yeah, there's the Kraken. So yeah, let's get that tail on and we'll take another look at him. Okay, so here is a closer look at the Kraken outside of the box and fully assembled. So this figure arrived for me on Friday, and I shot that unboxing on Friday afternoon. It is now Sunday evening, and I'll wrap this up, I guess. And I've had a couple of days now to sit with my Kraken and to think about it. And overall, I'm still pretty torn. All the things that bothered me about it when I first opened it up, they've been kind of eating away at me. And there is a couple of other things that bother me as well. Now, having said all that, I think this is a really cool figure. I think Star Ace, which is the company that produced this, did an amazing job. Like, it looks really good. And if you're a Kraken fan, I think you need to try and get this, especially if money is no object, then by all means, track this down. I've been curious about Star Ace's stuff for a while because they've been making big monster figures for a couple of years now. So they've been making lots of Godzillas. The only one I've ever seen firsthand is my local comic book shop, Strange Adventures. They have a Star Ace vinyl statue like this in their display case of King Kong from the movie Kong Skull Island a couple of years ago. And it is a really cool looking statue. And I actually don't have a large Kong figure. All the King Kongs in my collection are 6 inches or less. So to see this big 12-inch King Kong with really nice sculpting and detail,
I've been tempted to pick it up, but it's $200, and the fact that there is no articulation really kind of bothers me because I don't want to get into collecting statues. And there are other King Kong figures out there. But when it comes to the Kraken, I caved and bought a Star Ace statue because there just aren't any other Krakens out there. There's the original one from 1980, which, as I showed you earlier on eBay, that thing, you know, is selling for like $800 to $1,000. And there was another figure produced by Gentle Giant sometime at the, I don't know, in the early 2000s, I guess I would say. Now, I wasn't aware of that figure when it was first produced, but even when it was, I think it was probably in the, let's say, $150, $200 range. And at the time, I wasn't dropping that much money on a single action figure. You know, around 2000, I was still working like minimum wage jobs, so that would have been way out of my realm of possibility. So with this figure here now, I was able to afford it, but not easily. Like I showed you the price point. This thing here was available on Big Bad Toy Store for $450. Now there's another version, $499, that they call the Deluxe version. Now the Deluxe version is the exact same figure, except it has a little display base. It's a kind of a cresting wave that rests at right about here. And so that would also help. Just like, he stands up pretty well on his own. I'm not worried about him toppling over, but that little wave crest would probably help him stabilize a little bit more. So it came with that, and it also came with a little figurine of, I believe her name is Andromeda, the woman that they're going to sacrifice to the Kraken in the movie. So for me, like, you might be thinking, well, you already paid $450. Why not get the Deluxe version for an extra $50? Well, as I've said, this was already pretty expensive, and it was hard for me to justify that much. The extra $50 for a little wave and a little Andromeda just did not make sense to me. Partially because I hope to display this statue with my existing Clash of the Titans figures, and they are 3 3/4 inches. And this little Andromeda figure was probably like 1.5 inches. So it just wouldn't be to scale with anything else other than the Kraken. And it just didn't mean that much to me. But just so you're aware, if you're thinking of getting this figure, there is a Deluxe figure as an option. And that seems to be the case with pretty much all of these Ray Harryhausen vinyls from Star Ace. They put out a standard version, and then there's a Deluxe version that comes with some extra accessories. So, having said all that, so what kind of disappoints me about this figure is not only that it's kind of undersized for the cost, I feel. There is no articulation. And like I said, I don't fault Star Ace for either of those things. They were upfront about the size and the articulation in the beginning. So I just wish, when I'm paying this much money for a toy I've wanted pretty much my whole life, I wish it met all of my needs. And I don't need crazy, 10 points of articulation in each arm. Even if there was just a little swivel here so the arm could just turn a little bit, I would be happy with that. If the head could turn just a little bit, maybe if the jaw could go up and down. Very basic stuff, but it doesn't do anything. So those are the two biggest problems. The other one is the tail. So you can see here I have the tail attached now. And this is the seam where the tail attaches. And to me, it's just, it doesn't fit seamlessly. Like all of these tail sections, there's a ridge to them. But this one here, it's noticeably larger. I think it's kind of obvious when I look at it. Maybe it's just because I'm the one that assembled it. Maybe if somebody came over to my house, they wouldn't notice. But I really see this kind of gap here. I wish it fit together a little more snug. It did go together quite easily. I did heat it up a little bit with a hairdryer, and I plugged that in there. But yeah, I wish it went together a little more seamlessly. It just, I see that every time, and that seam kind of bothers me. The other thing that kind of bothers me is, even though I think the paintwork is really nice, like if you get up close here to his chest, let me get my light down here a little bit, as best I can. Yeah, so you see he's got kind of a base green color, and then there's a lighter green wash and a kind of a black wash to bring out all this detail. It's really nice. I especially love on the back of his arms. He's got these suction cups like an octopus. And so that's on the back of all of his arms. It's really cool. I like that a lot. But the problem I have is with his face, even though it's really nicely sculpted and painted, it just doesn't seem to match the rest of the figure. Like, this is all green, and other than the fins, which are kind of a brownish orange, he doesn't really have the brown-orange color scheme in his body anywhere, but his face is very brown. Like, it's almost got like a brown wash over it, and it just looks a lot darker than the rest of his body. And I don't know if it's because they were trying to maybe make him look like his face is in shadow a little bit, maybe because of his heavy brow, but I don't love it. His eyes are kind of yellow because it looks like they took almost like a brown wash. I'll try and get him up close here. But his eyes aren't a crisp white. And again, maybe that's because this is accurate to the original model, but I just feel like they sprayed some yellowish, brownish paint over his whole face and it got on his eyes. So I don't really love the color of his eyes, and just the fact that his head doesn't really seem to match the rest of his body. It's not a huge deal, but when I'm spending this much money on a figure, like I said, I want it to be perfect. And just speaking of the price, again, for 1 second, not to go on and on about it. But so this version here, the standard version, was $450. Now, mind you, I live in Canada, so that is American pricing. So when you convert to Canadian dollars, it's about 30 cents on the dollar. And then the shipping for this thing was probably another 50 bucks American, which turns into about, whatever, 70 bucks Canadian. And then I also paid about $40 in customs fees when this thing was at the door. So I think this guy cost me, over $700 or around the $700 mark. So very expensive. When you think of all the things you could buy with $700, this better be a pretty damn good figure. So I am, it's been a rough couple days. I'm kind of beating myself up about it. But it's hard to beat myself up too much because I do love the way it looks. Like, it is a really cool figure. It is a big figure. It's one of the biggest toys in my collection. It's just not that big for what I paid for it. Like, I have some vinyl Godzilla figures that aren't that far off in price. Now, mind you, they're not as detailed necessarily, but they probably cost me about $40. Like, I'm just going to grab a Godzilla for comparison. So here's the Kraken next to a Godzilla. I'm not sure if the scale of this is actually right. Godzilla would probably be larger than the Kraken, I think, if you really want to get technical about it. But, like, you see the size of this Godzilla. It's about equal. Like, if you were a kid, you could definitely play with these toys together. They look like they're in scale with one another. But this Godzilla, his detail is not crazy, but it's not cheap looking either. Like, it's a nice looking Godzilla. You can see here he has some articulation points. His head turns. His arms swivel ever so slightly. His legs turn. Anyway, this figure here was about $40. And so that's the point I'm making. $40 for this guy. $700 for this guy. I don't know. Now here's another example. This figure here I think was originally 60, 70 bucks, but I got it on sale for 30. This here is a T-Rex from Jurassic Park. And this guy is huge. Like, he definitely does not fit on camera here. And now the detail on him is definitely not as detailed. The sculpting, the paint, none of it's as nice. Like, look at those cuts on the bottom of his chin. Very unrealistic looking paint. But it's a nice looking figure. And like I said, I paid about 30 bucks for this thing. And he's probably 2.5 times the size of this Kraken. So you can see why I'm struggling. Now, if you'd like to see a couple other size comparisons, just to help give you an idea of how big this figure is, I mentioned earlier that he is about the size of a 12-inch, like, Hot Toys figure. So here is 12-inch Rocketeer. When you see him next to the Kraken, you see they're about the same height. So if you were to display this guy on your shelf or in a cabinet next to your 12-inch figures, he's right on par with them. And it definitely makes him seem a little small when compared to a figure of that size. Now, perhaps you'd want to display this guy with some of your 6-inch figures. So here he is next to a Spider-Man from Marvel Legends. Now, I don't know if that would make a whole lot of sense, but if you have, like, say, a fantasy line of figures like the 4 Horsemen's Mythic Legions, the Kraken might fit in with them. So here he is with a Mythic Legions figure. Now, for me, the figures that I wanted him to scale with the best was some 3 3/4 inch figures. Now, even though realistically the characters in the movie, when compared to this Kraken, they might actually be more like 1.5 inches, which would have lined up with the little Andromeda figure that would have come with him. But I don't really want figures that small. So basically the smallest figures in my collection are G.I. Joe sized at 3 3/4 inches, and that is the size of the vintage Clash of the Titans figures from 1980. So you see here I have Perseus. This was the star of the movie, played by Harry Hamlin. So he looks pretty good next to the Kraken. Like, the Kraken definitely looks large, but you know, the hero isn't so small that you can't actually make them interact. I only have 3 of the Clash of the Titans figurines. So here is another kind of like Spartan soldier. And here is Charon, the boat keeper. And yeah, so that's my Clash of the Titans collection. Now, I have wanted new Clash of the Titans figures for many, many years. Now, the Kraken was obviously the most important, but I would actually really like new versions of Perseus, Calibos, and other characters as well. Now, a couple of years ago, Boss Fight Studios put out a line of figures called Vitruvian Hacks, and they were all about like Greek mythology, and they made Medusa, which is a character featured in the movie Clash of the Titans, but never got an actual Clash of the Titans figure. So these are made in the 3 3/4 inch scale, and so she fits in quite well with these guys too. And here's just another kind of a Spartan soldier from the Boss Fight Studio line. So we put him in there. And he looks pretty good with the original Clash of the Titans figures as well. So yeah, not bad. So in summary, I think this figure is pretty great. Despite its flaws, most of those flaws come from it just being too damn expensive. I don't know if those costs are necessarily justifiable, but you know, if I wanted a Kraken figure, it seemed I was going to have to pay big money, because any of the previous releases of Kraken figures are very expensive on the secondary market, and you know, they're not making a whole lot of figures from this movie anymore, I don't think. It's, you know, it's like more of a cult favorite. It's not something like, say, Star Wars, where they're going to continue to make figures of this, and if I didn't buy this one, they'd probably make a bigger and better one a couple of years from now. You know, this is probably all I'm going to get for a good long time. So I do think it's great. I wish it moved more. I wish it was more affordable, but I think he looks really cool, and I'm really pleased that I can finally put together a Clash of the Titans display. So I'm not quite sure where he's going to fit into my collection. I don't know if I can fit him in one of my glass Detolf cabinets or not. But either way, it's a great figure. I'm glad I finally have him. So yeah, I would recommend this figure, despite everything that I've said already. It's still really cool. So that's my review of Star Race's vinyl Kraken statue. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button. Leave me your questions and comments below. I'm always happy to hear from you guys. And stay tuned, because I'll be back soon with another video. I'll see you then. Ciao.